Have you ever agreed to do something or to try something and halfway through you realize, oh, this was a mistake. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be here. Maybe when you were a little kid and all of your friends were out in the woods with you and there was this big tree trunk that had fallen across the stream, connecting one side to the other. And your friend says, yeah, we can do this. Let's go. And halfway across, you look down and you feel like you're so high and you look forward and it seems like that tree trunk is getting so small. And you think to yourself, oh, this was a mistake. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't have done this. Well, that feeling of, I don't think I can do this. What was I thinking? Everybody in our story that we're going through had that feeling too at one time or another. The Father had it. The 9 disciples had it. Jesus himself had it. And the crowd had it too. So I'll try to remember to point those out to you as we go through the passage. Now, this is the second in a series on how to increase our faith. What we're doing is trying to enlarge our ability and our capacity for confidently trusting God and in his power for every area of our life. And this is 1B. This is the second part of the first teaching in this series. I know, this is just weird, but it's 1B, and you're going to need to stop the video now if you haven't done this already, and good for those of you that already have. But there's a handout that goes with this video, so go to infavorresources.com, find the video 1B in the Faith series, look for the button that says handout, punch that, print it out, because we've got the passages arranged and some blanks for you to fill in. So we're calling this our purpose and our prayer, and this all takes place, we're right in the middle of this passage here. It all takes place after the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus goes up and he's shining like the sun. 2 heavenly beings, Moses and Elijah, come down and talk with him on the mountain. There's a cloud, and God speaks through the cloud, and the disciples overhear this, and then they have to come back down to earth then. On the way down, when they get to the bottom, they see a commotion, and it turns out that the 9 disciples that were left down there, Jesus had only taken James, Peter, and John with him. The other 9 had been unsuccessful in trying to free a young boy who was suffering from demonic possession. All 3 of the gospel writers record the same thing, that when Jesus asks what's going on, the Father answers him and says, I brought him to your disciples. I asked your disciples, I begged your disciples to cast the demon out and heal my son, but they could not. So we take up the story there. Now, when Jesus hears what has happened, or what has not happened, actually, he's not sympathetic or conciliatory or apologetic. Instead, he's furious. He's angry. Let's take up the story. Let's look over this to the right here. Luke 9. You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied. Over to the left, Matthew 17, the exact same wording. You unbelieving and perverse generation. Now, we all know what unbelieving means, but perverse, the word that Jesus used here in Matthew and in Luke, means to misinterpret, to be corrupted, to be misled, or to turn away. The ESV translates this, you twisted generation. It means to get it wrong and to get it very wrong, and sometimes intentionally so. So, with whom is Jesus angry? I mean, who is he calling a faithless and a perverse generation? Is it the Father? Well, that's kind of unlikely, because he had the faith to bring the boy to Jesus, but he did tell Jesus, I believe in you, but I have doubts too. I have unbelief. Help me with that. It could be the teachers of the law, in fact, almost certainly so, because they had been misled and they were misleading people. They misinterpreted everything Jesus did in order to draw people away from him. So they were certainly a faithless and perverse crowd. The doubting crowd that was there that day, very, very possibly, even probably, because most of the crowds in the Gospels seem to come to Jesus not for Jesus' sake, but for a miracle, to be fed. They're fickle. And I'm guessing that most of the people there that day were probably rooting for the boy, but some of them might have been rooting for the demon. And finally, the 9 disciples, absolutely. We're going to see next week that part of the reason for their failure was because of their unbelief, their lack of faith. So what makes Jesus so mad here is that the boy is no different and no better. After the 9 disciples had had shouted and declared and commanded and waved their arms and done all these things, the boy was no different or no better when they brought him to Jesus. And that was so, so wrong. Something's wrong here. So Jesus cries out. Back to the passage there. Let's look at Matthew 17 on the left. Jesus replied, "How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you?" Mark 9, "How long shall I put up with you? How long shall I stay with you?" Luke 9, "How long shall I stay with you and put up with you?" This is a cry of exasperation for Jesus. I mean, he's close to heartbreak. This is an expression of weariness. The 9 disciples, they already knew they were in too deep. I mean, they could say, we blew this. And they did it on a public stage. So we know they had that feeling of, oh, I went too far here. I took on something I couldn't handle. But now I'm thinking Jesus feels the same way. How long am I going to put up with you? When are you going to get this? Is this just going to be another day of unbelief and of bumbling and getting it wrong? He must have been thinking to himself, when will they ever get it right? Let's just go back to the passage again here. Jesus says in all 3 Gospels, "Bring the boy here to me." Then we're reading in Mark 9, and just a little bit there from Luke 9 to the right, "Even while the boy was coming." So in Mark it says, "They brought him, and when the spirit saw Jesus," so everything has been okay up till now for the demon. He's had his way. But when the boy starts to come toward Jesus and the demon sees Jesus, then everything changes. It immediately threw the boy into a convulsion, Mark tells us. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has this been going on?" You can hear the concern and the sympathy in his voice there. How long has he had to suffer this way? "From childhood," the father answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water." And notice this. This is Mark 9:22. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him." It's interesting to me that the father knew what the demon was trying to do. He knew that unless someone intervened, unless something happened, his boy was as good as dead. That's what the demon wanted. Now the disciples are seeing this. The 3 disciples and Jesus are seeing this with their own eyes. They're seeing the boy go down. They're seeing the convulsions. They're seeing the suffering. And they'd already heard about it, but to see it with their own eyes, that must have been heartrending. The demon intended to destroy the child. And when the demon who fears Jesus, who hates Jesus, who has contempt for Jesus, sees him, then he tries one last chance to kill the boy. William Lane said this in his commentary. It's there on your handout. The quote says, "The violence of the seizures and the repeated attempts to destroy the youth indicate that the purpose of demonic possession is to distort and destroy the image of God in man. That this demonic power, that this destruction, I should say, heaped upon a child." This was a little boy. You wonder, does Satan have any kind of sympathy? No, not at all. Does he know any bounds? No. He goes after everyone, especially the innocent and the vulnerable. This only serves to indicate how radical the issue is between demonic power and Jesus, the bestower of life. So on one hand, you have death and you have dying and destruction. On the other hand, you have life, life abundant, life everlasting. You know, people get involved in Ouija boards for fun or for the sense of power. They watch TV shows about witches and warlocks and covens and magical spells for entertainment. But all those demons behind those things, all they want to do is kill you. That's their only interest. They want to torture your children. They want to ruin your marriage. They want to take away your health. They want to make you miserable and angry and afraid. They want to bring about war and fighting and killing and dying. Anytime you're seeing stealing and killing and destroying, you know the enemy is at work and possibly in charge of that situation. He's driving it. I could give you a lot of examples of that, but during the riots that we saw recently, when you go to a building and there are police officers in the building and you barricade the door and then you set the building on fire so they can't get out, that's not a political statement. That's not protesting anything. That is straight from hell. That's the enemy, stealing, killing, destroying. He's a liar in the Father's line, and he's a murderer from the beginning. So back to the passage, and here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. We're still following Mark 9 there. So the father says, the demon's been doing this since his childhood. But the father says, if you can do anything, and that's the way he words it, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus interrupts him to say, if I can, everything is possible for the one who believes. Jesus is saying, listen, it's not my ability to act and my power that's at stake here or that's being examined. It's your ability to believe in me. Your faith is the key here, not whether or not I can do it. It's whether you believe I can do it. And I love this here because this is one of those completely honest and open statements that can only be made by somebody who hasn't been in church or synagogue all their life. They don't know any better. So it says, immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. What an honest, transparent prayer. It's the father's admission and it's the father's desire. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And so I said on your handout there, quoting William Lane, it's a candid plea for help at that point where his faith is ready to fail, right in those blanks there. Jesus meets him at the point where his faith is ready to fail. So it's both an affirmation of faith and a prayer for increased faith, which is what we're doing. This is our prayer. This is our purpose in this first teaching. So it says, when Jesus saw that the crowd was running to the scene, I'm reading right in the middle there, he rebuked the impure spirit. He said, you deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And the spirit shrieked and convulsed him violently and came out. And it says, the boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. Here's where the crowd gets that thing. They're right in the middle of the stream. And that now it looks like the boys died. It looks like they killed him. They went too far. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up to his feet, and he stood up. Then look over at the right there, verse 43. Luke 9 concludes by saying, and they were all amazed at the greatness of God. Just pressing in there at the bottom of your handout. What we cannot do and what others cannot do, Jesus can do. There is hope in every situation. Like the Father, we believe, but sometimes too, when we need faith the most, we struggle with unbelief. So pray the prayer that the Father prayed. After all, this is our prayer too. I believe, God, but help me with my unbelief. Increase my faith, Lord. I'm going to close this by just reading the words to an old hymn, and it's entitled, Oh, for a Faith That Will Not Shrink. Now, shrink can mean become smaller, but in the older version of the word, it meant to hold back, to turn away, often because of fear. So it's a prayer for a faith that will grow and not grow smaller, but a faith that will stand the test and not shrink back. Here are the words to the first three verses. Oh, for a faith that will not shrink, though pressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the brink of any earthly woe, that will not murmur nor complain beneath the chastening rod, but in the hour of grief or pain, that's right where Jesus was, and the boy and the father and the disciples, in the hour of grief or pain will lean upon its God. A faith that shines more bright and clear when tempests rage without, that when in danger knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. That's exactly the kind of faith that I want to have. A kind of faith that does not shrink back, that grows, that stands through the test, that overcomes the fear and doubt and gets me across that tree trunk until the other side of the stream. We'll conclude this passage and this teaching on faith in the next video.